Suzanne, it's 11.
Aren't you starting? I really don't have that voice. It is my pleasure. Actually, this is a real fun one, so I'm glad you're all chatting and laughing. It is my pleasure to introduce Cynthia Garcia from the wonderful Fairfield Sassoon Rotary Club and our social media guru.
Welcome. It's good to see some familiar faces. We're going to pass around a sign-up sheet. And if you want a copy of the slide deck, if you could put a check right here, so you don't have to copy what's up there. It will be available to you. So I'm just going to pass this out initially. You pass that thing. There you go. So welcome. So this year, the district is really putting a strategic focus on communications. So the district is actually going to look a little bit different. So we have digital marketing, a social media team, and part of the big picture is getting the Rotary story out there. And so what we wanted to do today in this brief session is talk to you about storytelling. Do you want to speak on this one, or do you?
You can.
Okay, so why? Why storytelling? Well, for millennia, we have told stories. This is how information is conveyed. We are built to tell stories. And so, what does it do? What does telling a story do? It engages emotions. So when you hear a story, your brain actually responds. Hormones are sent out, feel-good hormones, that do things like make you remember, make you decide to modify your behavior. Do you want to come on in? Come on in. It encourages interaction, but it leads to action. But we're talking, it's an emotional experience that you're having through this communication. And so we want to connect with people through stories. So I don't want you to think about this as kind of a manipulation. This is about building a community by telling your club story, your project story, a member's story, because we want that heart-to-heart connection with an audience. So when I say audience, I don't want you to think prospective donor, prospective member, because those are short-term states, right? So you're talking to humans and you're building a relationship through story. And yeah, I'm about to bring it all down. So some of you guys might have seen this slide if you were here in the digital marketing thing. So same applies here, because you're telling stories on behalf of Rotary, whether it's your club, yourself as a Rotarian. So when you tell your Rotary story, you need to adhere to the Rotary brand. So wear your Rotary gear if you're doing a video. If you're telling a story on paper, use the logo, use the colors, use the fonts, and we can get that to you. At the previous session, we had an identity at a glance, but we don't have that for this session. I can email it to you if you check the box that you want information, and we'll go ahead and send that to you. But you're also expressing our values. And we live these values in all the things that we do. So fellowship, aka friendship, global understanding, ethics and integrity, diversity, vocational expertise, service, and leadership. So when you're telling your story, these are great subject matters for you to build your story around, because it tells the story of Rotary. This is who we are. And Rotary actually, through its whole brand development process is come up with a voice. So when you're speaking as a club and you're telling a story, the Rotary Voice is smart, compassionate, persevering, and inspiring. So always keep that in the back of your mind when you're telling the story, but also remember that you are a human, you are an individual, your clubs are all different from each other. So use your club voice too. Your club might be silly, irreverent, formal, whatever you think of. When you think of your club, you need to be authentic and speak, as your club is. Because if you're telling stories about your club and you say, we are a highly professional group of men and women who take on the serious problems of our community, and then people show up at your club meeting and you're all wearing silly hats. You see, that's not authentic to who you truly are as a club. So speak in the voice that matches the overall Rotary International brand, but also make sure you tailor everything to who you are as a club and as an individual. And some of the things to keep in mind about, Rotary's guiding principles, we're about leadership, about joining leaders. We're about having big ideas that transform the world, and we're about taking action. We are people of action. So when you're telling your story about your club, yourself, your project, keep these principles in mind, and they should be like the foundation that you're building your stories. Because, what's key? What are you trying to convey to people? That we make a difference, we create lasting impact, and we transform the world. So when you tell the polio story, for example, let's say it's World Immunization Week and you want to write what your club has done to support the polio effort, bottom line, we've transformed the world, and these ideas should be underpinning your stories. And then Suzanne's going to come to speak about the nuts and bolts of storytelling.
Thank you. So intuitively, you probably know the difference between a story and a non-story. Do you think you do? Do you think you do? Because so often we will say in business, we will say in Rotary, we will say in our lives that we want to share a story. And then you look what's getting posted on Facebook and our websites, and it's people standing at attention, awarding a check, smiling. Now, that's important, but that's not the story. You're not getting the story out there if that's the image. Because think about that. If people go down Facebook and they see us standing with checks, is that saying what we're really all about? It's us standing. It's us being formal. It's sitting around tables. Yes, that's important because that's fellowship, but that's not the story. Now, I am an aspiring screenwriter after being a retired city manager. So I am going to get into a little bit of the true structure of a story. And if it's not resonating, I apologize because I just love this stuff. But if you take just a little nugget away from it, I think it will help as we try to formulate what a good Rotary story is that, as Cynthia says, conveys what we're all about. So you've heard of the 3-act structure, right? Heard of the 3-act structure? Oh, some of you know, okay. How many of you know the movie The Sound of Music? Most of you. Oh, good, because I was trying to find a real movie that a lot of people would know. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the 3-act structure, because this 3-act structure for The Sound of Music is the same thing. Oh my God, I love that mask. At first I thought it was Halloween time. Okay, you got me. Very good, very good. Okay, so a 3-act structure with The Sound of Music. Okay, Act 1 is you're basically doing your normal routine. And if you think of Maria, what was her goal? It was to be a nun, right? And so in Act 1, she wants to be a nun, but she gets into trouble right and left, right and left, right and left. And then her life turns upside down because before she becomes a nun, she's shipped off to take care of I don't know how many kids, right? The captain, and is it eight kids in The Sound of Music? It's a lot of kids. and she's going, what? So that's the end of Act 1. Okay, her life turned around in an unexpected direction. Act 2, think of it as obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and it grows. Okay? So at first, you remember the scene at and I'm doing this from memory, I did not rewatch the movie, but I remember these things. This is story. So she's sitting at the dining room table because the kids welcomed her with a frog or something in her bed. You remember that? And the kids all start crying, and the captain's going, oh my God. Okay, that was the first obstacle, to win the kids over. Okay, then the next obstacle was that the captain, the father, he really didn't know his kids. Remember? And she has the big blow-up scene with him. Then it gets more complicated because she starts falling in love with him. And how can we do this if I want to be a nun, right? It builds, it builds, it builds, it builds. Then they get married, and the Nazis invade, and he gets drafted into the Navy. See how it gets worse, 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 worse. At the end of Act 2, that's your all is lost moment. True of every movie. All is lost. It's as bad as it's going to get. What do we do now? Act 3 is resolution. In Hollywood, you will always have the obligatory chase scene. Okay, remember the Nazis' cars, and they're racing along. You will always have that. It can be running, it can be a track, it can be horses, but you will have that scene. And then, of course, they get away and they go off over the mountains, and you know the story. So that's a 3-act structure. Now, you may be sitting here going, okay, that's kind of fun, and you're going to remember all is lost. You're going to remember the life turning around. You're going to remember the obligatory car scene. Everybody does when I tell that story. Everybody does. You will remember that. But now let's see, how does this relate to us telling stories, which is the next slide. So, again, that's Hollywood. That's doing a blockbuster movie. And we are Rotary. But these components are still the components of your Rotary story, or your business story, or your movie story. So you start by saying, who are the main characters? Who is the hero? Who is the antagonist? And it's going to depend on your audience. And it's going to depend on your story. So, for example, your hero, it could be your club. Okay? Your club could be the hero, or it could be the people you serve. Okay? Both of them can be heroes. But let's take the club example. So, as a hero in a club, you identify a concern in your community that you want to fix. Maybe it's high school dropout rates. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe you want to go international, and it's your WASH program, or it's polio. Okay, that's the problem. That's the antagonist. That's the anti-hero that you have conflict with in your story. And so you want to fix the problem, but why does that problem exist? You have to answer that question to fix it, right? You can't just say high school dropout rates are high because how would you fix it? And there's no silver bullet, right? So your story with I don't have anyone from Fairfield Sassoon Rotary here except Cynthia and Jerry, okay? So with our Rotary Success Scholar program, where we wanted to deal with the high school dropout rate, We were looking at students that didn't have mentors. Homeless, living on the street, tied into the PAL Center. So that's a problem we defined. That was the antagonist. And then we worked to take that on. That's part of your story. And so what do you want for those students? Trade school? Community college? You're getting into those details of your story. If it's, oh, here's one. Here's a great one. God, it kills me. Maternity care. If you look around the world, there's like 5.8 million children die before their 5th birthday. And they should not. There is no reason for that to happen. That's a problem. And how do you fix that? You put those elements in your story. It can be education. It can be healthcare, mobile health clinics going around. Oh my gosh. Immunization. Enough nutrition. Those are all things that babies die of when they shouldn't die. Clean water. And so those are elements of your story that you want to tell. So you're dealing with the obstacles, non-clean water, non-health care, those types of things. And those are the elements that you want in your stories. And then, if your story is your club, if your hero is your club or you, and you've gotten through Act 3, you've been transformed, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Tell that. Don't just say, I'll stick with the maternal example. Don't just say, okay, we had this project and we went to Kenya and we built a clinic. That's great, but is that emotional tug that Cynthia was talking about? Maybe talk about a child. Maybe talk about a mom. Maybe talk about a relationship you had with someone in that project. That's a story with the emotional tug. It's heavy stuff, but I'm ready to turn it over to you. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And we do not do it enough. And I'm just as guilty. And I'm just as guilty.
And one of the things that Suzanne mentioned that I wanted to build on too, when she mentioned you went to Kenya and then this happened and that happened, telling a story isn't a series of events or tasks or activities. We have all been a victim of someone telling you a story, and I have done this myself, and then I went to the store and I went to get some grapes, but then they didn't have the red grapes, and so I ended up getting the black ones. They weren't sweet, and then, I bumped into the produce guy, and then I said this, and then he said that, and then I went to the checkout line. It was really long, so I did self-checkout, and I really hate that. That's a series of events. So when you're telling a story, don't do that. No one wants to hear that story. And I'm sure some people have been like the victim of that probably regularly from a spouse, a colleague, or whatever, and you roll your eyes and you're like, why? But it's just a bad story.
And just to add to that, it's the point of conflict. See, what Cynthia was just saying is this series of events, there's no conflict, right? And story is conflict, and I'm laughing. She did not share that with me when we were talking, but I'm laughing because my first screenplay, that was one of the first comments. This is just a series of episodes.
Like, aw. Aw. But one thing I also wanted to point out, what or who comes along to help? So when you're telling the story, let's say it's a story of a young girl who doesn't have clean water and has to walk a mile carrying, a ceramic container on her head, and She is your character. And you are the guide or tool. This is that thing that comes along that changes the destiny. So this would be a good space for you and your club to be right here, because you're telling the story of an individual, because people don't like to hear many stories that feature a thing. You know, they want to connect to a person, and stories are all about connection. So this is a good space right here for you. You're the guide, you're the tool, you're the thing that is the catalyst for change. And so where are you telling these stories? The way we describe story, it's very complex, don't you think? I mean, who here is a comfortable writer? Who loves to write? Who can tell a good story? Who feels like this is a lot of work? You're going to have to do a lot of research. Where's the thesaurus at? You know, who's going to want to read the thing I write?
You can be a good writer and still feel exactly that way.
True. So some of you might be saying, I think that this is going to be impossible for me. This sounds really hard. This sounds like a lot of work. And we're here to tell you that there's a million different types of stories you can tell. And there's different places for you to tell that story. Whether you're telling it in person, at your club, if you're a speaker at an event, if you're being interviewed. But you could also tell that story in a variety of digital places. You could do a written story with words and pictures. You could do a video. If you have a blog, if your club has a blog, you could write a long story there. You could tell a story in your newsletter. It doesn't have to just be a list of events and speakers and such. You could actually tell the story of a project or a beneficiary. And YouTube, we're encouraging people to explore video this year. So whether you do a formal script or you do a series of notes and you just speak about something that touched your heart, impacted your club, changed the community, made a big difference in someone's life. So there's a variety of places where you could tell your story. And your story does not have to be complicated. Your story doesn't have to, answer all of those questions that we showed you. Like, okay, I answered that one. I answered that one. You could tell a very simple story with an image. So, we have a villain. Let's say she's talking to you. You are the protagonist. Who are you? You're the homeowner, right? Her issue is she has to sell cookies. You're her obstacle. So our protagonist here, she said, buy my cookies. You said, I'm on a diet. And then she said, she's a problem solver. So this one picture tells the entire story. And our culmination, our climax, your house. So storytelling doesn't have to be as complicated as it might have initially seemed, but you have to have all of those elements for this to hit, right? If you don't have those, whether they're unspoken, but your mind took that leap and finished that idea for you. So storytelling can be as easy or as complex as you want to make it. Here's another story. You guys just felt something. Your emotions were touched. I just brought the room down because this story hit. This is 6 words. And you already have thoughts about who this person is, what happened to this baby. This is a tragic story, just your brain filled in the gaps. But again, all those elements, protagonist, conflict, transformation, all of that is in this slide. Okay, last time I tried to do this video, it did not work.
Actually, I tried it yesterday and it did, so.
Oh! Woohoo! No words.
Wow. Oh, that's cute. Yeah, that's amazing.
Again, this story told in video, no words, no music, but you guys felt something, didn't you? So this is a child who can't even speak, but they know has vision problems. So that guide or that tool that interceded was that adult who came in from the top and put glasses on that baby's face. And the climax, the transformation we saw is this child can see. And that laughter and joy at the very end. First it was kind of fussy and, he was having a hard time. But transformation without a single word. All the story elements were captured just in this less than 20-second video. So there are a multitude of ways that you could tell your Rotary story. Whether it's with a video, this is not an overproduced video. And I purposely turned off the volume to show you guys that you can tell a story in less than, a few seconds with 6 words, in a meme format. But writing is also a great way to tell a story. So this was an experiment. I don't know if you guys have I've heard of this a couple of times, where someone goes out and spends like $100 at Goodwill, and they buy items for $1 a piece. And then they turn around and they sell it on eBay. But they put a story with it. And it was called the Significant Object Project. And so this person wrote a story, and they paid $1 for it. And this creamer cow, sold for $26. So my grandmother, Zippy Friedman, was an administrator at Austin Riggs Psychiatric Hospital in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, for several decades, beginning in the 1950s. She was also a close friend of artist Norman Rockwell and was instrumental in having him admitted there during a particularly gruesome bout of depression. Yes, the acclaimed illustrator of those aggressively cheerful Saturday Evening Post covers suffered from chronic depression. Anyway, for whatever reason, Norman brought this golden cow creamer with him to Riggs and then failed to bring it home, which is how it ended up in my grandmother's kitchen in nearby Pittsfield, where it sat on the windowsill next to a Provençal rooster, also made of porcelain, until her death in 1983. What's more, according to my mother, at some point my grandmother started referring to the creamer as Norman, as in, let's all have tea, someone grab Norman. Which makes me wonder if something bad happened between them. I mean, why? If you can't tell from the pictures, the cow's got a pretty angry and unforgiving look on her face. And depressed though he frequently was, the real Norman Rockwell was apparently a delightful, kind man. Mysteries never cease. So anyway, my young daughter told me she finds Norm scary. And we get our hot beverages to go at Starbucks. But he really is a piece of history. No chips, lovely glaze intact, pours well. So that $1 investment, $26 sale, based on nothing but a story. And another storyteller that I saw said that she had a couch. She was trying to give it away. It was an old couch. Her son had moved out. She'd redone the furniture. So she had this couch, and she put it on Nextdoor, free couch. People were messaging her, hey, I'll take that couch if you can deliver it. And she was like, no, I'm not delivering this free couch. Or someone says, I'll come get that couch, and then never showed up. And so she wrote a story about the couch. Her target audience was moms whose kids were also going to college, and the same way her son was leaving, she's like, yeah, people are now furnishing apartments for young people. So she wrote a delightful story about the years of love and happiness that were experienced on this couch that the family enjoyed. She sold the couch for $100, and they came and picked it up. And again, it was all a post. So she thought about who her audience was, what would matter to moms when their kid leaves home for the first time and gets their own place. And she wrote to Mom, and Mom said, oh, spend $100 on that used couch, and I'll come get it. So storytelling can be quite powerful, especially now. When you look at what's going on in the world, there's a trust study that shows that trust and truth have declined in society. People feel that government, media, other institutions are not trustworthy. But what is our reputation as an organization, as Rotarians? We are competent and we are trustworthy. We're fair. We have really great, for those who know us, we have a really great set of ethics, and people recognize that. And so we are experts at what we do and how we change the world. We have the perfect voice at the perfect time to tell stories about what we do, how we do it, how it impacts the world. So this is the time that we really need to amplify our voices, you guys. We need to talk about what we do. We need to do it on social media, our newsletters, in video, in the community. We bring speakers to us, but we could be speakers too, right? And we could tell our stories. City council meetings, schools to children. There are a million places where we can tell our Rotary story or our individual Rotarian story. So this is what we're trying to do, is help you guys build your skills as storytellers and your desire to tell your story. Because I think a lot of us are quite modest. So you don't actually have to tell your story if you feel, ew, that's kind of weird. But you could tell the story of a beneficiary, right? You could tell a story of that student. You could tell the story of that hungry person, that sick child, and how you or your club or someone in your club were the tool or the guide that looked at those obstacles and said, nope, we got this. And what you did, and you build that tension and you tell that story of transformation. So
I have one thing to add. As I was thinking about this, we have lots of stories to tell, and as Cynthia emphasized, you need to think of your audience. And I challenge you to Google negative things about Rotary. What's bad about Rotary? And you would be surprised what you see. And that gives you an opportunity, if one of your audiences is to get the word out about Rotary to people who have misconceptions of Rotary, you need to know what they're saying or thinking or observing so you can counter that. And I don't know how I stumbled on that. I was shocked. I was shocked. But likewise, if your audience is a younger group or a group of retirees, Google on what is of interest and need to those different segments of your audience so your stories can outreach and resonate with those individuals. And I don't know how we dealt with the world before Google and the internet. I mean, the resources out there are just phenomenal. And so I'm actually keeping, as I read different articles in terms of audiences, I'm using a Bubble Up program, and I know there's lots of apps out there, but it will save these stories based by category of audience that I have set up. Because that's how we get our word out there. So.
Excellent points. And I think the honesty, too, of, if someone says, I don't like this about Rotary, and it might be a true thing. You might go, yeah, we are guilty of that. But I think being honest and authentic is really important, and knowing who we're for and who we're not for, and actually talking about it. Because I think people value that kind of integrity where you could say, you know what, they may not like us, but we're not for them. This is who we're for, and this is who I'm talking to, and these are the challenges these people are facing, and these are the people to whom I'm responding when I tell my story about how we help to overcome that challenge for a group of people, because I'm speaking to these people right here, and I'm looking at their values.
Yeah, so audience is key.
Audience is key, for sure. So join us next door if you're interested. Think of that gem, that bit of wisdom you want to share.
Awesome.
And so hopefully we'll see you there.
Awesome.
And also, if you're interested in being a sergeant, see someone in a red vest.
If anybody's appetite, you're interested in working with us at the district
You are
level,
too.
This is so
Love to talk to
fun.
you. Thank
Oh
you.
my God, I love this stuff.
There's a resource that just come out.
Am I going to give up my
It's
lunch?
not a Rotary thing, so I didn't really.
You know what?
buy
I
it,
didn't
but
realize it was
people
going to be in
have
this
done them all.
space. I thought I was going to be able to get lunch. So I'm going to...